Chapter 3. Goldenrod, I startled you when I said, I am God, and yet you might have known me by my beard gone gray, my stopping for the shrill of turkey call, the way I lovingly caress the lingering light of day, and sniff at sassafras and goldenrod. You might have known, had you, but seen that I, a man tricked out in red and black, checked flannel shirt, a shoulder stoop and balding, tracing toe in dirt the home, town street before me lying brown inert, raise longing eyes towards the mountain sky. You could have stopped to talk with God a bit about the possibility of floods next year, about the heaving pumpkins and the corn in ear, and where I saw a copperhead, and where a deer if you had seen God sitting where I sit. You called the mental institution, so God might not have to spend the night in maybe snow and certain frost, that God might have a place to go between the coldly starry sky and frozen sod. I startled you when I said, I am God. Uncle George was not my uncle, he was my mother's. Once in a long while he drove his Studebaker hawk into the yard, and stopped for an hour. He was on his way to, or from, a dentist's convention. I think they were in Atlanta, and he drove up from South Florida. In those days, there were no interstate highways, and Tallahassee was still on the main drag north. I know Uncle George very well, and I knew his two boys, Dennis and James. Dennis and James were awesome, because they went to boarding school. Besides, they were older than I was. We never were close. But the mysterious character was Aunt Margaret. One day Uncle George arrived in his new Studebaker hawk. He got a new one every year. This time, he did not just stay for an hour and leave. He took us with him. We were all going to the state hospital in Chattahoochee to see Aunt Margaret. I had no memory of seeing her before. I never saw her again after that, until years later when she had been released and was living at home. We did not go into the hospital. We sat outside in the sun. There were white lawn chairs all about. Aunt Margaret had on a nice dress. I did not know that she had been looking forward to the visit for a long time. Her face looked worried, but she was nice to me. Maybe she realized that I was God. Chapter 4. Anna al-Haq. They killed al-Hallaj because he said, Anna al-Haq. They understood correctly that he meant that he himself was God by saying this, Anna al-Haq. I am truth. They might have let him live. Why should they kill a man for telling a lie? Had any of those who agreed to his death refrained from lying when it was to their advantage? Not one. It was not to his advantage when al-Hallaj told that lie. Maybe the devil made him do it. Of course al-Hallaj was not God. I am God. Even when they announced I had been born, I was God. I demonstrated this by my total disregard for the comfort of others. I paid not the least attention to the arrival of my bowel movements. I did not consider who was likely to be annoyed by them at any given moment. I later submitted, I know not why, to the indignity of potty training. So my journey through the illusion of humanity began. They took me to a drug store that had a section with child-sized tables and chairs. If I had used the potty, they bought me ice cream. If I had maintained my divine dignity, they bought ice cream for themselves. So they used behavior modification to induce me, God, to act like a human being. A day will come when my deity is no longer clouded. I shall totally disregard the exit of any material from my bowels. I shall not hold it back, nor consider the desires of others in this matter. People will consider this normal and appropriate. My deity shall have been established for one and all. I shall be in perfect peace. All education is training in self-deception. Learning is the process of turning away from the heart to the crust. To be educated is to ask the wrong question. The most effectively educated people are those with the least schooling. However, college is one of the best ways of avoiding education. There are only 3 valid questions. Who am I? Who are you? Who is God? The answer is one and the same. God is just dog spelled backwards. The bright liberal thinks that such remarks are fabulously witty. The uninitiated may even think them original. It is not lack of humor that keeps the religious person from smiling. Rather, he has already struggled with doubt so much that such remarks merely appear childish instead of funny. No one has doubted so much as a person of faith. In practice, the freethinker is singularly free of religious doubt. Last night, such an educated liberal asked me quite seriously if I thought God had created man, or man God. As the creator of Auguste Comte, I was undismayed. That question has been debated for thousands of years. I did not tell her that if man created God, he created him in his own image. Yet I somehow think she would have found that thought deep and stimulating. Instead, I told her that God created man, but that was his mistake. More to the point is the question that has recently been resurrected from an even more ancient discussion. Did God create woman, or woman God? There is only one possible answer. Woman created God in her own image. She still does. Chapter 5. Seagulls I sweep around the world 1,000 times to keep the sunrise in my view, and watch the flame of fire on a cloud that climbs each day about the globe unerringly and true, and then turn on my heels and go again, this time face forward as I go, bathed in the bright of sunset 3 years, then let sunrise, sunset. Sunrise pass me as I slow, come to a stop on earth, and so begin a day of being God once more among hearts and houses where none will let me in, to spend days watching seagulls on the shore. The first seagulls I can remember were on the Gulf of Mexico. Once we went out on the Gulf fishing in a great wooden boat. It was painted green. That was also the first time I saw people eating raw oysters. It makes me thankful. I am God when I remember it. But maybe they would say I was missing a gourmet's treat. They stood out on the oyster bar opening the shells. When they found a fresh oyster, they just tipped up the shell and let it slide into their mouths. There was a grocery in town called Setzer's. It was Jewish, and everything was marked if it were kosher. We went there once a week and bought everything we needed. At that time we lived in the same house with my grandparents and a cousin of mine. The whole family went shopping. It was one of the high points of the week. Even though the store was Jewish, not everything was kosher. It was the largest grocery in town and had everything in it. There were oyster crackers, marked with a circle. U, and my grandfather loved those. There were small cans without the circle U that contained rattlesnake meat. I avoided looking at them on the shelves. I knew very well where they were. In the early days we lived in North Florida and spent vacations in West Virginia. I yearned for West Virginia and the mountains all the time. It was like going to heaven the rare times we could afford to take off and go. I should know, being God. We would drive through Georgia first, and I watched the iron-rich red earth going past. The hills began to show, and then we were on the Blue Ridge Parkway. Finally, West Virginia came. There were my cousins, aunts, uncles, grandfather, and grandmother. My grandmother asked me how old I was. I held up 4 fingers. I remember West Virginia from the very earliest days. My father always teased me for being born in Ohio, but I do not remember Ohio at all. That is a strange thing because I am God. What I remember first is Philippi. We lived in a little white house on the main street. I remember the orange marigolds in front of the house. I ate too many of them and got diarrhea. I remember the 2-storied house with the wraparound porch on Main Street in Elkins. It was my grandmother's house, but we had an apartment in it. One morning I saw frozen milk curling out of the top of the bottles. There were no seagulls. The next time I saw the seagulls was in California. My mother was teaching in a boarding school in Monterey Bay. Strawberry fields separated our house from the dirt cliffs that opened on the Pacific. I could look south and see Salinas. The concrete ship lay a good height to the north. Mostly, I stayed on the half-mile of home beach. There were no shells. I became a specialist in hell. Why not? I am God. There are two ways of viewing. The first way is the way of confrontation. The second is the way of unity. There are three kinds of confrontation. The first is the confrontation of I. The I relationship is basically cannibalism. Such an I has the objective of devouring all things. This is the objective that produces pollution and the destruction of the world. As long as everything other than I is seen as a resource, cannibalism is the only possible result. Most people are cannibals. A step above the I, relationship, is the I, she, fe, he, fe, the relationship. The attitude becomes more personal. The world is not made up of resources, but of people. People are no less objects of ownership than things. The third person is the relationship of slavery. It is the attitude that produces conservationism. We realize that we must take care of our resources in order to continue to benefit by them, indeed, in order to survive. This is a growing minority. A step above the I, she, they, he, they relationship is the I, you relationship. This is the highest level of confrontation. It is polite exploitation. It is rare that a human being rises above this pinnacle of ethical idealism. This is the most refined form of confrontation. The way of unity rejects confrontation, understanding that the very perception of otherness is a form of aggression. This is the I relationship. That is, there is no relationship at all. There is nothing but I. I am God. Chapter 6. Santa Claus at New Year, shaving off the beard, is the strangest, most exotic practice a primitive tribe ever invented. It is more curious than tattooing, painting, greasing the hair, or putting discs in the earlobe or upper lip. There is nothing in the whole repertoire of female idiosyncrasies in the West to compare with it. Only the binding of women's feet in China can be placed in the same class. The binding of female feet was a practice to ensure the submission of Chinese women. The atrocity of the custom reveals the strength of the Chinese woman and what a threat she actually posed to male hegemony. On the other hand, it might merely reveal the paranoia of the Chinese men. But I go back to the Western practice of shaving off the beard. This, of course, is inspired by the noble concept of the equality between the sexes. Once this noble concept is twisted into the most foolish one, the identity of the sexes stage has been set. The identity of the sexes implies the pragmatic necessity of cutting off the very real differences. Hence, we have this first step in the transsexual process. Shaved men do not turn into real women, however. They turn into trim poodles, stamping their dainty feet. They turn into cocks with their combs cut off, turkeys without their gobbles, goats without horns and beards, lions without their manes. They turn into ridiculous and pitiable shadows, following their women and beating up on them in frustration and misplaced masculinity. They turn into beer drinkers and wine sippers, the only two categories left once the transsexual operation has been begun. A man stopped me on the street yesterday and demanded to know why Santa Claus was out the day after New Year. I tried to explain to him that I was not Santa Claus, despite the beard, but rather God. "The devil you are," he said. "No," I said. "I am serious. You as a Christian believe that Jesus is God, don't you?" "Well," he said, "that's what the church teaches. Yet you have never seen Jesus, nor heard him say he was God. You can see me and hear me say it." He just laughed and walked off. My father was in charge of the construction of a school of nursing in McElwain, Puerto Rico. I was put in a Spanish-speaking high school in my senior year. Schoolwork was hard, but I found friends. I had a discussion with some of them about the existence of Santa Claus. I proposed reasons to show that it is impossible to demonstrate that Santa Claus does not exist. I even proposed some reasons supporting his existence. It happened when I was at the beach with a group of students from the high school and college. They were all from the Dominican Republic. Most of my friends were. Since I carried an American passport, I was somehow more popular with them than with the native Puerto Ricans. They had some guitars and enjoyed the evening beside the Caribbean singing and talking. I lived in Puerto Rico for only 1 year. Still, I miss it, even after all these years, perhaps, especially after all these years. I even miss the people I never got to know well. I miss the Dominicans too, although I was never in their country. A similar discussion arises around the existence of God. In my case, no proof is necessary. Since I am God, it is sufficient to take and look and see if I exist. For myself, I am perhaps in the poorest position. Unlike others, I cannot look at myself. I am the one on the inside looking out. My wife and daughter were watching one of Shakespeare's plays in the Barbican Centre in London. Since I myself inspired Shakespeare, I could afford to volunteer my services in occupying and entertaining my 11-month-old grandson. As long as it was still light, he enjoyed being pushed about the streets. When it began to get dark, he became fussy, and I hurried towards the centre to get him into the lighted hall. More than one Londoner paused to watch God fleeing through the gathering night with a crying baby, and went on to inform the police. 2 policemen met me at the door of the centre, and demanded to know what I was doing with the child and who I was. Knowing it would only cause trouble if I told the truth, I produced some kind of identification. One of them brought my daughter out of the theatre to identify me. The men were very gentlemanly, not like policemen in Finland. You are disconcerted when I say, I am God. You have neither understanding nor sympathy with such a statement, even though it is clear, simple, forthright, and honest. But your face turns serious with sympathy and understanding when one of your fellows says he is trying to find himself. If you were honest, you would say, why? When did you start to think you were lost? Here you are, right here, right now, with me. Nothing is more obvious than the fact that nobody ever needs to find himself. There is just no possible way of getting rid of yourself. You are always with yourself. No need to look in the cupboard or behind the door. Yet you can accept that kind of nonsense day in and day out from every Tom, Dick, and Harry. But when I say something straightforward and reasonable, such as, I am God, you either think me insane or begin racking your brain to understand what I really mean. I mean what I say. I am God. Chapter 7. The Emperor's Old Clothes. We used to go to Sears and Roebuck every fall before school started to get new clothes for me. We went to a shoe store for shoes. My parents were particular to get shoes to fit my narrow feet. All the boys wore long blue jeans. They were not in fashion. We just wore them because they were the cheapest clothes to be had. We wore the same pair all fall and all spring. Our mothers reinforced the knees with patches from the very beginning. By the time summer came along and we were free, it did not matter any more what they looked like. By then the cuffs we had turned up when school started had been straightened out, and the pants' legs barely came down to our ankles. Besides the blue jeans, I got a brightly colored flannel shirt for winter days, and a cotton shirt for warm days. We were not poor. I had a change of socks and underwear for every day of the week. The most important item was a short winter jacket. Looking back on it all, even from the 1960s, it seems barely even to attain the poverty level. After all, we did not even have a black and white television set. My grandfather had a radio, yet we would have been highly offended if anyone had hinted that we were poor. We had almost nothing, but we needed even less. Poverty is a product of consumerism. Sunday was wash day for us. My father and grandfather were at home that day and did things about the house and garden. The washing machine was going all day, it seemed, and I could not stand the noise. I preferred school days. I was wandering about my business of being God one day in Leningrad. They call it St. Petersburg again now, with that quaint lack of touch with reality that so characterizes the human population. They truly believe that the tag is more important than the essence of the thing. Photographers are sometimes more observant than others of light and form and color. I met one of these. He asked me whether people on the street addressed me in Russian. I assured him indeed they did. Then he remarked, "Yes, they think you are Russian." "Why is that?" I asked. "Because you dress so poorly," he answered. In fact, I do not dress like a Russian at all. The Russians are as meticulous in dress as circumstances allow. Meticulous or not, all human beings use dress to express what they believe themselves to be. I, who am God, on the other hand, use dress as part of my disguise. Any human dress will generally serve the purpose. Being God, I take whatever is convenient, sometimes with, from the human point of view, the most appalling lack of taste. I am, after all, clothed in glory and majesty. There is no other dress that expresses what I am. I therefore find it impossible to dress with that hopeful anxiety on which real human beings spend so much energy. Whatever I put on has symbolic connotations that are immediately read with unerring instinct by the human populace. Instinct, in my creations, is a most marvelous trait. And from this point of view, although they little realize it, human beings are as fantastic as migratory birds and fishes. All of the contradictory meanings they attribute to my attire are inaccurate. Yet my clothing reveals rather than hides my identity. I understand my human creations perfectly. But even as I penetrate their universe, I cannot lay aside the awareness of my divinity to the extent that I can share the human anxiety for dress. It always shows. It is all a matter of awareness. Because the human being lacks awareness of his true inner self, he compulsively creates an ultimate importance in attire. When down jackets were in fashion a few years ago in Poland, some young people who could not get them committed suicide. Try as I might, I cannot penetrate this world of mine as a real human, totally ignorant of reality. I cannot completely lose my sense of glory and majesty as I pull on a pair of jeans. Chapter 8. Pecan's my best friend was a boy named Colin. We were inseparable. We never quarreled once in all our lives. They had a cow, and real butter Colin's mother made. She also made banana cream pies with vanilla wafers. They owned their own house, but I think they had a hard time making ends meet. Colin's father was dead when I first met him at the age of 3. Colin was born the day before I was. We played together for hours at a time, digging with sticks in the dirt, eternally building the castle in the picture, hanging in Colin's mother's back bedroom. We never finished it. Sometimes we visited the hunting dogs, kenneled at the edge of the cow pasture. They would howl and squirm, wriggle and pull at their chains. Every year we waited for the pecans to get ripe. Long before they fell, we danced about under the trees, holding our arms up towards branches we could never reach. We begged the pecans to fall. Eventually they did. Being God, my appearance as a human being is mere play. Since it is play rather than a serious occupation, I make more mistakes at it than do those who engage in it as a vitally serious activity. Consequently, people are quicker to point out my mistakes than they are those of real humans. They somehow sense that I am not putting everything I have into the business, and that is vaguely unforgivable. By my stars and splendor, I am doing the best I can. Being God, how can I put everything I have into being a human? I put in the right amount with studied care. But the studied care itself is an affront to the human race. Did I slip up by saying that I made mistakes? Hardly. Is it a mistake for a boy pretending to be a dolphin to flap arms instead of flippers? Still, it is an endearing human conceit that I, God, make no mistakes. When one of them meets with tragedy, humans console one another that God erreth not in his ways and doings. Jumping Jehoshaphat, I only made one mistake in my life, and I could have avoided that one if I had listened to the advice of my angels. The only mistake I ever made was in creating humankind. It is a mistake to think the goal is to perform the motions of a law or religion to perfection. It is a mistake to think the goal is to have a vision or a mystical experience. The goal is to know that I am God. I recently acquired a book of 3-dimensional paintings. They look like irregularly placed colored patterns when you first look at them. But when you look at them in a certain way, a 3-dimensional picture emerges, unless you see the 3-dimensional picture. Opening the book and looking at the pictures is pointless. Adherence to religion is opening the book. Looking in a certain way is the mystical experience. The point of the exercise is to know that I am God. Religion and experience are otherwise a stupid waste of time. Chapter 9. God in a Tallinn taxi, I refuse to be accused of favoritism, racism, or ethnocentricity for the statement I am about to make. But it is a fact, and I as God am in a position to know that there are more honest Estonian taxi drivers in Tallinn than Russian ones. That is only natural, you say. Tallinn is in Estonia. Well, if you say that, you have never tried to get a cab in Tallinn. When I say honest about Russian taxi drivers, I speak in relative terms. I mean that he will honestly try to get you where you're going without thinking of cheating you, unless you really work at giving him the opportunity. Now there are precisely 3 such Russian taxi drivers in Tallinn at present, and even they make up stories to keep the respect of their colleagues. The Estonian drivers are another breed altogether. One young man poured out his heart to me. After all, I am God, and I do not even have to follow any vow of discretion. I can tell you his troubles. When I entered the cab, he started talking. He was polite, educated, sophisticated. He had a sense of humor. He was everything you ever wished for in a cab driver. He was still talking when I got out of the car. My wife is leaving me, he said. I have a house and a car, and I've never been unfaithful. There isn't even another man. She just says I talk too much. I felt for him, but what could I do? After all, I'm only God. I could not very well make her stay with him. The Quran reports that I changed some Jews in David's time into monkeys for not keeping the Sabbath. They set their traps on Friday and picked out the fish when the Sabbath was done. You should not blame me for what happens to your mind when you think about business during your prayer. You think you could concentrate on your spiritual life better if you could see me. Yet when I appear visibly to you, you deny that I am God. In truth, you cannot see me. It is not because I am so insubstantial as to be invisible. It is not because I am too far away. You do not see me because I am so close to you, closer to you than the blood pumping through your heart. Your spiritual life is not a matter of concentration, but a matter of realizing how close I am to you. I am closer to you than you are to yourself. You do not see me because you are looking on the other side of yourself. I am here. I am God. A Christian approached me to tell me that I was confusing salvation and spirituality. We do not need spirituality, he said, but salvation. He suggested that I believe in the Lord Jesus Christ and be saved. I said, saved from what? In God. Another Christian reminded me that the most important thing is the Eucharist. Now that was too much. I said that I had never accepted human sacrifice or cannibalism, and I was not about to start now, especially not with my own Son, Jesus Christ. My mercy and grace are infinite and sufficient, without any blood, without any sacrifice, without any cannibalism. Maybe you think it appalling that someone should be so naïve and discourteous as to give God advice. I agree. On the other hand, most Christians use almost all of their prayer time to give me advice. I have gotten used to it. Chapter 10. The ocean and Abu Hanifa. For a mountain boy, I have a great fascination for the sea. My first collection of poems was written on the Pacific, stomach down on the salt sand, chewing ice plant. Even earlier, the Gulf of Mexico pulled me into its colors and smells. I think the immensity of the ocean is what attracts me as God. I feel at home in it. My father built a house a few years ago in a town on the high eastern plateau of New Mexico. He had trouble selling it, and I spent some time there for the purpose, looking out over the wind-burnt dirt horizon. My father, a mountain man, could see no beauty in the place for its lack of trees, but I saw the immensity and felt at home. I inspired Moses to say, "Hear, O Prince of God, the Lord is our judge, the Lord is one, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy might." Deuteronomy 6:4-5. The famous story of Rabbi Akiba is very moving. It is said that as his tormentors were torturing him, the time of prayer came. As Rabbi Akiba repeated these words of the Shema, he broke into a smile. His enemies in amazement asked him why he was smiling. He said that for years it had been a sorrow to him that he did not know how to love God with all his soul. But now he knew. With that, he died. The story is moving in any case, but especially because the rabbi, even in death, did not understand my words. I did not ask anyone to die for me to show their love. Nevertheless, Rabbi Akiba was very astute in noticing the problem. How can anyone love God with all the soul? The key to the problem is in the book of Leviticus, and Jesus picked this up when he quoted it, saying, "Love thy neighbor as thyself." There is only one person in the universe that all people love perfectly, and that is the self, the soul. The other can be loved as self only when the other is self. When that self is completely melted in me, so that there is no other self but I, then I am loved with all the soul. The Shema is not a command, nor even a promise. It is a remark on reality. There is perfect love of me, God, when there is only one. So far no one has asked me why I think I am God, but I have the answer ready, just in case. I do not think I am God. I am God. It goes without saying that no one has asked me how I know I am God. I will answer anyway. An angel did not tell me. Think about it. If I suddenly met an angel in a bright and overpowering vision, would that prove I was God? No. Not even if the angel said so. Angels are inferior to God. God cannot know he is God because an angel says so. He has to know it for himself. How do I know I am God? There is only one way. I know for myself. You observe me doing ritual ablutions and prayer. You think you have caught me in an inconsistency. You ask, can God be in a state of uncleanness? To whom do you pray if you yourself are God? Well, you are right. I cannot be in a state of either purity or impurity, for I am God, and it is I who decides what is clean and unclean. Nor do I address prayer to anyone, although it is unlawful for others to address prayer to anyone but me. I am not bound by even that rule. In regard to prayer, I am entirely free. When I do ablution and the form of prayer, I do so entirely by way of example. It is my purpose that men shall obey my commandments. I refrain, therefore, from giving them an excuse for disobeying me. The ocean cannot contain my foot, and must I wipe it with the universe to satisfy Abu Hanifa? There is not a world in the universe large enough that I might prostrate myself with my forehead upon it. And must I gather all the stars into one place to satisfy Shafi? In what direction shall I turn in prayer when there is no direction but I